Yeah, so it was so wild, I have to say, Rahul, like seeing that in the news cycle, because I'm always watching the news cycle, like doing what I do, and I'm like, wait a minute, I know him. And,
Yeah, it was
yeah,
great reconnects that came from that, and past life, and just in the past, and just a changing world. But I was oblivious to, I was doing the news, right? So it wasn't, and I was locked in. So for those 4 days after, and I don't want to take it out of sequential order here or anything, but it was, I mean, it was on 3 hours of sleep across 58 hours. We reached across 5 continents in 4 days. I think I did 68 interviews. So I wasn't able I mean, it was therapeutic as well, because adrenaline was flowing. There was paranoia going. I mean, we could get into all the surveillance that was happening here afterwards. But I was talking to journalists in Singapore and India at like 3 a.m. and 2 a.m. and like, really talking and laying out a lot of the things that were coming to me, because it was important to get that story down simultaneously. The parallel efforts, the government had their own kind of spin on it, and at a point 3 days afterwards, it was, Rahul Dubey lied. When you have your chief of police of, metropolitan city that you're a resident of 17 years and call you kind of public enemy liar number one, you're kind of like, oh, after, what happened as well. So there was a lot of things where I knew we had to kind of, I thought eventually someone would naively, and we get into how naive I was prior to that, thought that someone would come to the table afterwards and be like, yeah, listen, that got out of hand. We're kind of sorry about that. And, these are the things that, racism kind of exists, right? Prior to that moment, and this is probably the biggest revelation and change that came to me, after opening the door on June 1st here on Swann Street, was, that racism, white supremacy actually does exist. It was always like, oh, it happened over there. Or, it's maybe a little bit, there's some assholes in the world. And when I saw it immediately, where I saw this police, it was immediate good versus evil right away. And you saw it, I felt it. There were others of the 70 plus that were here. We've talked about it after, felt it coming down the street, like, and goosebumps a good 3-4 minutes before anything really popped off and the explosions and the tear gas went flying. So the revelation for me in these last 2 years, and we can dive deeper into this social justice and advocacy work, is, as an immigrant, first generation, born and raised in the United States, I was always told to conform, to be white, and kind of to fit in. And so, I always kind of was, very kind of shrug off the struggle and the original sin. I wasn't even aware of, that slavery happened. These naive things that were programmed into me really just shattered the minute I opened that door. The minute I saw the police and the authorities, because there were other metropolitan police and government agencies here, unleash hell. It was immediate. Like, the whole facade was shattered. So that's been kind of a major turning point for me in the last 2 years. And a lot, you look at a lot of the health equity work that I was doing. How was I able to even address health equity when I wasn't even knowledgeable to the fact that racism exists within this system of healthcare? And so unless I was wondering why these solutions that actually were proven weren't being rolled out, and it was the intent's not there to keep that equity kind of away from the populace, to segment off a good portion of it to benefit a few. And $3.6 trillion healthcare industry benefits a few in a lot of ways, a lot of dollars that go to the top. And so, that's helped me, one, get through my embarrassment of how could I be so naive to not see it, but then also, okay, now I know who the enemy is, and that's racism. And so, holy shit, let's go after that.
yeah.
Before we get into that stuff, I'm curious, have you ever been into activism or protests prior to this? I mean, it seems like you would have to be, at least have your finger on the pulse of it some way, to have the ability to do that in that moment.
I had buried, like a lot of people, yeah, sure, passionate about things, but bandwidth issues or shrugging things off and not, it hurts me when I see a young black male gets shot by the police and nothing is done. But I get on my plane and catch the next meeting that I have. And that's how I used to be. I did march, and I was the liaison for my son's elementary school and marched in the DC Gay Pride Parade and got the kids to march in that as well. That was already set up when my son enrolled there. But we were involved. I wouldn't say I was an activist, but socially leaning, yes, but really not, and volunteering here and there, but not an activist in any way. And it was always, I thought I was in some way. I mean, you always convince yourself you're doing some good work in healthcare, bringing behavioral health tools to the underserved population, working with state Medicaid departments, driving innovation to drive down lower costs and make care and high cost prescriptions more accessible. So, but never, and talking about that and talking about consumerism, but not driving anything, using it as a means to a solution to transform a U.S. healthcare system, for sure. And that innovation has helped me in a lot of other things. But to advocate publicly, or to even really be in a march, sure, I would see a march go down the street and I would stand up and give it its respect, but I wasn't the one rallying in a way that I'm showing up to things now.